Hey guys, Tyler here. Back to the Future is one of the most beloved science fiction franchises of all time. Initially a trilogy of comedy films directed by Robert Zemeckis and written by Bob Gale, Back to the Future has expanded into a multimedia empire with a massive pop culture footprint. Each installment chronicles the adventures of high school student Marty McFly, played in the films by Michael J. Fox, and also an eccentric scientist named Dr. Emmett Brown, played by Christopher Lloyd, as the two use a time machine built out of a DeLorean to visit different eras of the fictitious town Hill Valley, California. Much effort has gone into analyzing the film's themes, the mechanics of its time travel, and the second film's depiction of an alternate 2015. But while I'm not a film review channel, I'd like to offer my thoughts on Back to the Future's time travel and alternate history, comparing them to real-life expectations about time travel and our own future. Let's get started. Did you know that flavored air devices are quickly becoming the leading alternative to vaping and smoking? It's an entire new movement towards better habits, led by today's sponsor, Fume. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device that fills the void ditching a bad habit can leave. You'll still have something to reach for. Fume draws flavor to your mouth through a passive diffusion system, but doesn't use vapor, meaning you can use it anywhere. No nicotine, so it's not addictive. And no batteries, so you'll never have to charge it. The device looks awesome, is perfectly weighted, and incredibly fun to fidget with. If vapor were compared to sticky soda, Fume cores are closer to herbal teas. They've got lots of delicious flavors to choose from, like crisp mint and orange vanilla. Based on my channel name, you can probably tell which one piqued my interest the most. Fume is backed by doctors in the US and has served over 300,000 customers. You can be their next success story. For a limited time, use my code OrangeRiver to get your free topper, the perfect accessory to your Fume device. Slip it onto the mouthpiece for a softer, warmer feel. It's chewable for those who love to fidget and is reusable. Head to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use code OrangeRiver or scan the QR code on screen to get your free Fume topper when you order your Journey Pack today. Now, back to the video. First, in case you haven't seen the films, in particular the first two, I'll give a brief summary of their plots. Spoiler alert, Doc and Marty travel through time. Shocker, I know. In 1985, Marty helps Doc with a time experiment in the Twin Pines Mall parking lot. Doc unveils he has converted a DeLorean into a time machine powered by plutonium he swindled from Libyan terrorists. After the terrorists suddenly arrive to seek revenge, Doc is shot, and Marty accidentally activates the DeLorean's time travel capabilities as he reaches 88 miles per hour. Marty arrives in 1955, the year Doc invented time travel, in order to get Back to the Future.
Hey, that's the name of the...
Marty tracks down a younger version of Doc and convinces Doc to help him. Without any plutonium, the only way Marty can return to 1985 is to harness a lightning strike from an upcoming thunderstorm. He must do this while ensuring that his parents, George and Lorraine, fall in love after Marty inadvertently interrupts the two's original meeting, which threatens to erase him from existence. After making it back to 1985, Marty finds that his family is now rich, but his celebration is cut short after he and his girlfriend Jennifer are persuaded to come with Doc to 2015. Doc hopes to enlist Marty's help in preventing Marty's son from getting arrested for participating in a robbery, an arrest which kicks off a chain of events that destroys the McFly family. Much of their activity has been observed by the McFly family's arch-rival, Biff Tannen, who steals the DeLorean and gives his younger self an almanac with the results of major sporting events from 1950 to 2000. When Doc and Marty return to 1985, they leave Jennifer on her front porch. They slowly realize the 1985 they've returned to is not the one they know. Biff is now one of the wealthiest men in America, very obviously modeled after Donald Trump, and Hill Valley is now a corrupt dystopia. Richard Nixon is also still president, and the Vietnam War continues to rage on, sort of like an inverse of Watchmen. Marty travels back to 1955 again to retrieve the almanac and reset history. He succeeds, but is then prompted to travel back to 1885. The events of the third film are somewhat disconnected from the first two, although at the end, when Marty arrives back in 1985 once again, he avoids an incident that causes his future self to be fired in 2015. At this point, I'll start breaking down how Back to the Future's time travel works and how it stands apart from real-world theories about backwards time travel from physics. In the first instance of time travel we witness in the series, dubbed Temporal Experiment Number 1, Doc sends his sheepdog Einstein 1 minute into the future using the DeLorean. This does not create a new timeline as Einstein travels forwards rather than backwards, an act that does not itself violate the laws of physics. This is, of course, because we're all traveling forward in time, all the time, just by existing. As for why a DeLorean is used, Doc responds that the car's stainless steel construction helps during temporal displacement, although he doesn't go into much more detail. A companion reference book elaborates that the car body serves to make the flux dispersal from a key component, the flux capacitor, more uniform. The name of this device was inspired by neutron flux, the distance per unit time traveled by neutrons as a byproduct of nuclear processes. While the car does not run on gasoline and instead contains entirely electrical components, the real power behind the vehicle's time-traveling capability is plutonium-based. A nuclear explosion is needed to provide the 1.21 gigawatts, or gigawatts as Doc says, of energy to send the car through time. Normally, the operator is seated inside and, by turning a handle near the gear lever, activates time circuits that display the destination, the present, and the last departed time. The user enters the target date on a keypad and accelerates to 88 miles per hour, activating the flux capacitor. During acceleration, the car is surrounded by electric current like a Tesla coil, and subsequently disappears with a flash of light, leaving a trail of fiery tire tracks. After the trip, the exterior of the car is extremely cold, and frost even forms from atmospheric moisture. The reason for this is uncertain, although my personal hypothesis is that it could have to do with the car briefly entering a vacuum realm, which would necessitate very powerful insulation to keep occupants safe. Vents on the back of the vehicle heated after re-entry. As far as what happens after one travels back through time, well, that's where things get even more interesting. I don't know why I said it like that, I just needed a transition phrase. Essentially, in Back to the Future, when somebody travels to the past, they create a new timeline. Except this new timeline can, and often does, start to overwrite the established historical events of the observer's original timeline. This is most straightforwardly illustrated in the first film when Marty's siblings start to disappear from a family photograph as he makes inadvertent changes to the timeline, which affects his parents' potential relationship. Eventually, he also starts to disappear himself, but is able to preserve his family's existence after George and Lorraine share their first kiss. Similarly, in Back to the Future Part 2, Biff Tannen's interference in his own past created a scenario where he becomes a multi-millionaire and even marries Lorraine after George is killed, which, by the way, was written into the script after George's original actor, Crispin Glover, objected to the messaging at the end of the first film that Marty's family is rewarded with materialistic success rather than his parents just having a loving relationship. The consequences of this interference are not felt until Doc and Marty travel back from 2015 to 1985, presumably as they haven't rippled forward to that date yet, and because that feature still needed to exist for them to leave it. Either way, this is an example of what is often called a mutable timeline, one whose history isn't fixed and whose past can be altered. It stands in contrast to another conception about backwards time travel that has since gained more acceptance in science fiction and popular culture, which is based on the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, aka the multiverse hypothesis. Under this model, time travel to the past not only results in branching timelines, but these branching timelines don't necessarily interfere with each other. Specifically, there is no direct danger of overriding history or causing paradoxes. In fact, Many Worlds is designed to solve such paradoxes, at least on paper, by insisting that every potential outcome of an event happens in parallel universes. Back to the Future doesn't really deal with parallel universes per se, although I have personally made several videos about parallel universes pertaining to franchises like Fringe and Star Trek, as well as the validity of the hypothesis itself. But Back to the Future definitely skews more in the direction of time paradoxes. Not that Star Trek doesn't either, but the mutable timeline is the backbone of Back to the Future's time travel. It's also worth noting that the Many Worlds interpretation is not universally accepted among physicists. Most believe that branching timelines are too clean of a mathematical solution to the problem of the universal wave function. By this point, everyone is probably familiar with the Schrödinger's cat thought experiment. We don't need to get into that. But given it's a fictional universe, and in real life, time travel is widely considered impossible, there's no reason time travel couldn't function the way it does in Back to the Future's continuity. That said, are the film's time travel mechanics even remotely plausible? I mean, they don't go into a lot of specifics, but the Back to the Future films are comedies, and so they're not meant to be taken too seriously. When it comes to spacecraft, Einstein's theory of general relativity indicates that such a vehicle traveling close to the speed of light will essentially time travel to the future due to time dilation. The occupant of said craft would notice their clock ticking slower than observers on the outside, and in fact, satellites in Earth orbit must periodically correct their clocks because of time dilation from Earth's gravitational pull. There are also theories about backwards time travel that involve traveling through wormholes or using other methods involving large gravity wells, such as Star Trek's slingshot maneuver. Naturally, though, these kinds of thought experiments often result in time paradoxes, which most physicists are not comfortable with, since they violate causality. I've also made calculations on this channel before pertaining to how much energy would be needed to power spacecraft like a Romulan warbird via its quantum singularity engine, although that figure was measured in terawatts. No black holes are mentioned in the operation of the flux capacitor, so I can't really tell you if the 1.21 gigawatts generated by the plutonium reactor has any basis in reality. But one of my favorite go-to analogies when analyzing time travel or wormholes in science fiction is the Casimir effect, in which random quantum vacuum fluctuations can cause macroscopic objects like electrical conductors to spontaneously oscillate. In modern physics, the Casimir effect plays an important role in describing the behavior of protons and neutrons in an atomic nucleus. And through the application of linear algebra and calculus, this model has implications regarding higher dimensions, which is very appropriate when talking about time travel. So theoretically, it's not as difficult as one might imagine to map out how a time machine could work, but in practice, satisfying the energy requirements and other complicating factors like quantum effects could preclude them from existing, much like faster than light travel. Long story short, the quantum realm is very weird and we don't really fully understand it. A fuller understanding of it will either grant us the keys to develop time travel, or, more likely in my opinion, prove why it is in fact impossible. But again, in the world of Back to the Future, Doc Brown has figured at least part of this out. So why not take a detour and highlight some of the interesting differences in Back to the Future Part 2's version of 2015? And in classic Orange River fashion, examine how many of these differences could have come to pass. Okay, first off, I think it's important to clarify that when Zemeckis and Gale were crafting the sequel's vision of the future, they weren't trying to actually make wholly accurate predictions because they knew they were going to get a lot of them wrong. What they prioritized was making the film's future funny and also a nice place to live. That said, the film actually did get a lot of things right, whether intentionally or by coincidence. So going forward, I'll break down the differences in Back to the Future Part 2's 2015 into two categories: the outlandish, relatively speaking, and the accurate, starting with the former. One of the most notorious standouts of this alternate 2015 is the prevalence of flying cars, which the filmmakers knew wouldn't happen, but just had to be in the film. I guess I can get behind this reasoning. While flying vehicles have been around for over 100 years, flying cars still face a number of practical challenges. Technically, a version of them is possible that incorporates aspects of airplane or helicopter technology. But legally speaking, the implications that flying cars would have on traffic laws, traffic accidents, and insurance means that, unless they're self-driving, they'll probably never happen. As many have observed, a lot of people can barely drive in 2 dimensions. Why give them 3? Another early noticeable element of this future is Mr. Fusion, a home energy reactor that future Doc uses to power the DeLorean. While cold fusion, that is, fusion that can operate near room temperature rather than the conditions present inside hydrogen bombs and stars, has been theorized for decades, it hasn't happened yet. Famously, the results of a 1989 experiment by Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons claiming to demonstrate cold fusion have failed to ever be reproduced. That said, the concept itself hasn't been ruled out, but we're still pretty far away from developing a working prototype cold fusion reactor. In Back to the Future's world, perhaps cold fusion research continued on a grander scale into the 21st century. However, it is worth noting that the Mr. Fusion reactor cannot itself power the DeLorean, only its time travel components, and cars still rely on gasoline, just as in the real world. Doc also references the existence of rejuvenation clinics that can add years to a person's life, which may be accomplished with gene therapy, a technology that does exist today, although we have not quite cured aging. While not particularly outlandish in concept, a 2015 newspaper reports on Queen Diana's impending visit to the United States, indicating that Diana is not only still alive in this timeline, but Queen Elizabeth evidently passed away before the year 2022. Doc makes a remark about the justice system being swift as the lawyer profession has ceased to exist. Yeah, that didn't happen. Marty is frightened by a holographic advertisement for Jaws 19, a playful jab at the real-world prevalence of seemingly endless movie sequels and reboots. Famously, Back to the Future Part 2 helped popularize the concept of hoverboards, futuristic skateboards that can float off the ground. While many groups have attempted to build one using superconductors to generate lift, such prototypes generally require the superconductor to be cooled using liquid nitrogen. As of now, it's not certain that a device like the one seen in the film, which operates obviously at higher temperatures, is physically possible. Inflation has impacted the US dollar such that $100 is considered spare change, whereas things haven't quite gotten that drastic in real life. A dog is seen being walked by what appears to be a fully autonomous drone, which, while technically possible, is not a go-to method of pet owners even today. Lorraine places a shrunk, dehydrated pizza into a food hydrator and grows it to full size almost instantaneously. While one can assume this is playfully derived from the space-age obsession with dehydrated and vacuum-sealed foods, which many people put in their microwaves in real life, the method seen in the film is obviously over the top. And finally, Marty is seen wearing a double tie, a fashion style so deeply unrealistic that it frankly stretches suspension of disbelief more than the time travel. On the other hand, Back to the Future Part 2 makes some predictions that weren't far off the mark. Shoes with self-tying laces have been manufactured and sold, including by Nike. While the Chicago Cubs did not win the World Series in 2015, they did win it the following year. Bionic implants can grant humans capabilities like enhanced strength and speed. Such body modifications are not very common today, but do exist. And even in the film, it seemed to be a technology still in its infancy and not fully legal. While the United States has yet, as of the recording and release of this video, to elect a female president, many women have run for major party nominations over the years. While thumbprint locks have not replaced doorknobs en masse, fingerprint scanning is used for security purposes in many public places like airports and schools. The McFly home has a flat-screen television, a staple of American living rooms since the late 2000s. It's also outfitted with a number of other smart home features that have become common since the 2010s. Electronic payment, sometimes using fingerprint scanning, has also been common since the 2010s. And of course, Marty's kids spend much of their time wearing VR headsets. Obviously, these are not all of the feature technologies and pop culture references in Back to the Future Part 2, but they're many of the ones that stood out to me and I had something to say about. Hopefully you enjoyed this deep dive into the science of Back to the Future's time travel and overview of its wacky world. Let me know your favorite part of the films in the comments section down below. With that, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a thumbs up down below and don't forget to share it. That stuff really helps me out. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to do that as well so you won't miss future uploads, and click the bell icon to receive all notifications. If you want to support my work even further, you can become a patron at patreon.com/OrangeRiver, link in the description, or become a YouTube member by clicking the join button on my channel page. By becoming a patron, remember you get access to awesome perks like behind-the-scenes photos and videos, patron and member-only polls, name in the credits, merch discounts, and more. Or you can drop a one-time super thanks or PayPal donation, all are appreciated. Links to my PayPal as well as my social media and merch store are in the description too. And big thanks once again to Fume for sponsoring today's video. That's all I have for this week. I'll see you sometime.